to have you. Just before we go to the top business stories of the day, we begin in Nigeria, where there are reports that a pipeline along Ijegun axis of satellite town in Lagos has exploded, stirring panic within the vicinity, leaving many to scamper for safety. Footages on social media capture the flames and people running helter-skelter in a bid to avoid being cut up in the flames. Reports say about 2 have died, 8 injured, and about 30 vehicles burnt. Meanwhile, vandals are being blamed for the Nigerian authorities for that explosion. And Arise crew has been on ground, and Alero Diadere. All right, hopefully we'll get her back on to give us more details there. Now to business news. The Nigerian government says the country will sign the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement at the upcoming meeting of the African Union in Niamey on July 7th. In an official statement, Nigeria agreed to join after extensive domestic consultations, and it will now focus on discussions to ensure all the required safeguards against dumping, smuggling and other risks and threats are met. The bloc is expected to be the world's largest trading group, and it will increase trade among member countries and allow firms to enter new markets. High competition within industries could also boost productivity. And joining us in the studio to discuss this further is engineer Mansur Ahmed, the president of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. He is also the executive director of Dangote Groups. It's good to have you with us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Let's go to it. After months of uncertainty, the Nigerian government yesterday finally indicated its readiness to sign the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. We can also see that after man's initial objection to the Free Trade Pact, it has now come round to accept it. What brought this change of heart, you think?
Yes, well, indeed, there was no objection to actually signing. The man's position was simply that before we sign, we need to undertake an exhaustive consultation, as you said, with key stakeholders. Because at the end of the day, government can only engage in the administrative part of it in signing. Trade will actually take place between people, between companies. And to a large extent, manufacturing sector is the core to successful trade expansion in the country. So what we asked for at the beginning, this was in 2018, was that this consultation needs to take place, that we need to understand what are the risks involved to our economy, to our manufacturing sector, what are the opportunities, and how, and what can we do to ensure that we mitigate the risks and we take advantage of whatever opportunities that exist. That was what we asked for, and that was what happily President Buhari insisted on doing by setting up this committee on the assessment of readiness, as well as the opportunities for African free trade. This took some time, but we're happy now that the committee has completed its work, has done an extensive amount of work, and it has reported to President Buhari, recommending that, yes, Nigeria should sign, but clearly we should take steps to ensure that we're not just signing, we are signing with a clear understanding of what we need to do to take advantage of this free trade area agreement.
Indeed, hence the cautious approach by Nigeria to it, as it were. Very good. Now, as Nigeria takes the first steps to becoming a member of the Continental Free Trade Bloc, it is important to acknowledge the downside risk for local businesses and, of course, the Nigerian economy. So what do you think the government should do urgently to address the infrastructure deficit, eliminate bureaucratic bottlenecks, and improve access to cheap funding as well, in order to make local businesses more competitive and better positioned to benefit from the trade pact?
Yes, indeed. We can only take advantage of free trade area agreement if we have the capacity to produce and to indeed meet market demands. And the core thing, obviously, is competitiveness. If our industries are not competitive, clearly, we're not going to benefit a great deal from free trade. So the first thing is infrastructure, both physical infrastructure as well as trade facilitating infrastructure. Look at our ports. While we are struggling just to keep our ports open, our neighbors in Ghana have actually created a new port already. So clearly we have a long way to go to ensure that we can be competitive, because clearly this trade facilitation infrastructure is key to successful trade. If it takes us 2 weeks to actually take a container in and out of the port, and it takes the Ghanaians maybe a question of 48 hours, then we really have a competitiveness problem.
All right.
And of course, it's the same thing, even internal infrastructure, as we all know, Even this morning, I read Buhari was saying that his government is not satisfied with what has been achieved in the power sector. Manufacturing in particular is dependent on energy, particularly on electricity. We have to do something really radical to improve our power supply to the economy and particularly to the industrial sector.
Very good. All right, Mr. Mansur Ahmed, I would like you to hold on to your thoughts. We have to go to Ijegun Live, where our correspondent, Alero Diadere, is there to give us more update on the fire inferno, which you can see right there in your visuals. Alero, if you can hear me, what's the latest there?
Okay, Niyi, we actually had to move. I had to move from where the fire service bus stop down to the Ijegun Canal. This was actually where the fire started. And I'm actually with a woman who stays around and is also an eyewitness to this particular incident. So good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
So could you just get to tell us what happened?
Yes, around 5:10, we started inhaling petroleum something, So I woke up and I was checking my whole house. I thought it was my gas that was leaking. But when I was about to open my door to come out, I had two people shouting, "Oya, Oya." Then I woke my children up. Then we just had boom, and the fire came up. Not knowing that the diesel or something like that, or petrol, it was around us. It was surrounding us. So fire started, and we had to leave the house, and every other tenants and neighbors left. So we were running to the other street, and we saw fire again on the other street, our Lumate Street. Then we were running to Fatade. As we were on the Fatade junction, we saw fire at the Ijegun 5 junction, where fires happened in 2008. So we just came back home and we learned that some people died in their houses. Some people were able to come out, but they were hurt. Some people were burnt. Some were dead. We saw 2 people dead on the canal. Even they said one of the people was supposed to travel tomorrow, out tomorrow morning. So that's what happened. Okay. And the fire is still burning.
Okay, yes, we're actually coming from that side. Now let's talk about the main reason. Some people get to say that there were actually some of the guys that actually vandalized the pipelines came in with about 2 tankers.
No, 6
tankers.
So they loaded 4. They already loaded 4. They were about to load the 5th one when the pipe was leaking. The pipe started leaking. So it was running down the gutter from Isolo Road to the canal area. But we learned that somebody wanted to start his car or bus. That was when the fire exploded. So that was all. But after, when we came back to our houses, they have burgled our houses. They stole our...
Who burgled your houses?
Some guys that said they wanted to try maybe to put the fire off. But the fire entered my house, but it went out. Just burnt my net, some of the clothes. But some people entered our house immediately behind the canal to rescue, but they stole our things.
Would you get to say the fire service was actually prompt with their response?
No, it was around 6:30 that they came. And the fire started at 5:15. So we were already running. People were running to Isolo. Some people were going to, because we could not pass this place, they were going to Ijedodo. But before they came, it was only 2 that came then. But they had to go back to get some others. But they are still there, trying to put the fire off.
Now, you mentioned something that in 2008, this particular incident had actually happened before.
On a Thursday. It happened on a Thursday, on a Thursday like this, in May or April 16, May 16th, to be precise. And the 3rd day, the people came back to vandalize the pipe again, and we had to stop living around this place. We left our houses here to go to the city to live, because we could not even cook food that time, because the petrol spoiled everything. Even in my well, the petrol is still there. In boreholes, At least the government, it seems as if the government has forgotten us in this Ijegun. Because the canal, they came to park the canal like 6 years ago. So when the rain that fell on Friday, last week Friday, troubled us. We could not come out. We could not go in until Monday that we were able to leave because the canal was over-flooded. So it happened in 2008, and there was nothing even to remember the people that burnt because people were burnt. People died. So many people. It's not like this, but people died that time. But the government did not do anything. They just came like 3 or 4 weeks ago to clear the pipeline from Ikotun. That's only what we saw. And when they finished, people came back to the pipeline again.
In this area, don't you people have local vigilantes that will be able to just get to secure the area?
We have the security watch, these security guards on our streets, each individual street. But I don't know about the community. I don't know. Because last night, around 10, the street lights were put off. So nobody suspected that something like this will happen. So they seized the opportunity to off the lights so that nobody could see them. But immediately they brought the light, the fire started. So that was what we saw. They always leave the light until like 12 o'clock. But nowadays, they said about 4 days ago they came, but they could not vandalize. But today, they made it a success. And they killed some people. They killed couples, children. And most especially, that man that was about to travel tomorrow, is dead now. Well, he's supposed to travel out tomorrow morning, but he's dead. They have carried the corpse away. So we are tired in this Ijegun. We are tired. We are tired. Let government come to this area. We are tired. We are not enjoying anything. We cannot drink our water.
Not give the opportunity for them to come and tap the pipeline. Yes, playing the pipeline, give them the opportunity. Due to that, right? They did the fourth one. The fifth one is there. And all the tankers did not have numbers. All the tankers did not have numbers. Due to those that are working, they give these people police information. So police were like, what are you doing there? From there, they attacked. They started shooting themselves. The bullet, something like the bullet now goes straight to the tanker.
Were you there?
Something, I was coming by this morning, 5 o'clock. Even those 2 people that they died, they were still burning afresh. Fire, yeah, this morning. They were burning afresh. So the bullet that now goes straight there. Now make the petrol start leaking.
All right then.
So from there, it started gushing down.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Niyi.
Very good, Alero. Many thanks for your update on the Ijegun fire suburb of Lagos there. We'll be right back after this break. Stay with us. Good to have you back on a Global Business Report, and I've still got with me President, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Engineer Mansur Ahmed, and we've been talking about Nigeria's readiness to sign the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Good to have you again.
Thank you.
All right. Just as China and India are the biggest markets on the Asian continent, the Nigerian market also offers tremendous potential, as it were, under the Continental Free Trade Deal in terms of investment, as it were. Now, to what extent do you see this as an attractive prospect for your association, the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria?
Yeah. Well, indeed, the AfCFTA will obviously create a huge market, 1.2, 1.3 billion people. And a large part of that is actually, if you like, middle class. That's the purchasing, tremendous purchasing power. So it does create potential opportunities, particularly for manufacturers, for producers. We see that as an opportunity for Nigeria because, as you are aware, Nigeria is one of the largest economies in the region, the largest actually in Africa, and therefore stands to gain, provided 3 things happen. Right. One, provided that we actually do strengthen our manufacturing capability. Today, the manufacturing sector is adding less than 10% to the GDP. That's very low. And for an economy such as ours, we should be talking about 20-25% of GDP if we are to be competitive. Right. So clearly we need to build the production sector. And I am glad that that's what Muhammad Buhari actually highlighted in his address when he was receiving the report of that committee, that we ought to be thinking not just of trade policy, but also of production strategy. How do we strengthen our productive sector so that we can actually engage in trade more profitably? The second thing, of course, is that we must find ways of eliminating abuses in the trading scheme, trade facilitation abuses, smuggling, dumping, with some of the things you have highlighted. These are things that have challenged Nigerian economies, African economies for decades. The third is that we must have a very clear basis for ensuring that investment flows in at the right level and for the right things. What one fears, and what has in fact agitated the mind of manufacturers, is that if you allow a situation where people will come and invest only in the end, the final bit of the value chain, in packaging and so on, and then use that to trade, to import into other African countries, you will be killing many thriving manufacturing establishments. Right. So we must have rules of origin which are very clear, which we also ensure that will push up the productive sector. Certainly, our demand in man is that we should be asking for not less than 80% rule of origin. That is, if what you are producing in a country like Togo or Benin Republic or Cote d'Ivoire is not up to 80% in terms of the inputs into the manufacturing process, then perhaps you should not access the free trade area arrangement. There have been suggestions that it should be as low as 30% or 35%. I think that will not help much. Okay. So these things. Secondly, of course, there must be a very determined effort to make sure that the rules are upheld. Nigeria and African generally regulators are notorious for failures in upholding the rules. So clearly, if we don't uphold the rules, if we don't ensure that there are strong mechanisms for ensuring that everybody plays by the books, then we're going to have serious problems. So that's why we believe that this level of this time we have spent to consult, to study, because we undertook extensive studies. MAN itself took extensive studies in this area and recommended the output to the government, has been worthwhile in identifying those things we have to do, to be ready and to make sure that, yes, the African trade area agreement will in fact benefit Africa and certainly benefit Nigeria.
Very good. Now, given that the federal government will be signing the first phase of the agreement, is there any specific framework or safeguards that the Nigerian manufacturers would like included in this agreement in order to shield local industries, and just like you mentioned earlier, from smuggling and dumping of cheap goods coming from Asia and Europe, as it were?
Yes, indeed. We have obviously made several recommendations along these lines. First of all, in terms of identifying the process or the period within which the liberalization has to take place, we have suggested that the proposal that we see on the table at the moment of a 5-year period is too short, that it should be extended, and also that it should not be just based on time, but also some readiness criteria should be incorporated, so that if you're going to remove custom duty from certain subsectors of your economy, we should assess the extent to which your economy, your sector is ready for that to happen, along with the time frame, etc. Thirdly, I think we have insisted also that in the process of negotiating these details, because what we have signed, what President Buhari is signing today, is the framework agreement. The details, whether say the devil is in the details are yet to be negotiated. So the components of those frameworks, the rules of origin, competitiveness issues, trade flows, movement of people, movement of goods, all these issues will still have to be negotiated in detail. These negotiations have started, but obviously we are indeed going to be a part of it, and we expect that in negotiating these details, the real sector, the productive sector representation should also be incorporated. Thirdly, I believe that there's also the issue of the regional organizations, the RECs, the regional like ECOWAS and the Southern African group and so on, that these already have been formed, and to a large extent, ECOWAS has gone far ahead of many of the other African regions.
All right.
That what has been achieved in this region should form the basis of subsequent agreements, so that the RECs themselves should be strengthened. And that would be even an easier way of expanding the agreement, the open market, to a continental level. We have played a big role. That means Nigeria has played a big role, as you know, in ECOWAS. A lot has been achieved. There's still a lot more, but we believe that we have to start from there. So the RECs should form, if you like, the blocks that will constitute the negotiating parties during the negotiations of the Continental Agreement.
Very good. I think you've just highlighted some of the conditions attached to that mode of negotiations by the Nigerian government, also being cautious about it. It's very heartwarming to note your organization's stance on this. Now, let's look at some specifics here. Current data shows that 18% of intra-African trade is transacted primarily through the informal sector. What this implies is that the Nigerian government has to bring the informal sector, which accounts for 65% of the Nigerian economy, to the formal sector. So what would you advise the government do in this regard?
Yes. Well, first of all, the informal sector, particularly this is the small and micro scale level. The informal sector have been trading for many, many years across borders.
Indeed.
However, this trade is never recorded, so we really don't have accurate figures in terms of what percentage that constitutes. Okay, 18% is a fair figure, but I think it could be actually more. Now, I think three things need to be done to encourage. First of all, we have to bring the informal sector as much as possible. We have to formalize.
Okay.
So you cannot really do much to control, to manage the informal sector if it is not captured in the formal trade process. Secondly, I think there's the issue, particularly of the, if you like, trade facilitation activities, trade facilitation rules, trade facilitation infrastructure that we talked about. That has to be improved considerably. Transportation across borders is extremely, extremely weak. And obviously, there has been a lot of effort at the continental level, at the regional level, to strengthen across-border infrastructure, whether it's roads or power or whatever, communication. That also really has to be addressed. Third, of course, is financing. Well, we have made a lot of progress at the West African region in terms of trying to create this common market, and it seems like there is now a lot of effort to push this through. Yeah. Because without this common currency arrangement, trading across borders will still be undermined by excessive costs. Because the cost of trading, if you have to change from one currency to another and back to trade, then of course you have cost implications. So the effort to build this process to achieve the common currency, I think, should be sustained. Thirdly, of course, as I said, our regulators really have to scale up the act. That we need our regulators to understand that their responsibility is not just revenue generation, it's actually trade facilitation. All right. And they should focus on that rather than focus on generating revenue. And of course, capacity building within the whole system, whether it's among the trading community or among the regulatory community. I think we need to do a lot of capacity building. Thirdly, I think the general area of financing. Clearly, the problem of access to finance has been a huge, huge impediment to successful trade, particularly at the medium and small scale level. And I believe that this is something that we've been discussing with the CBN for a long time. There has been several initiatives to try and improve access to finance by the manufacturing community. I think this must be sustained and scaled up considerably.
All right, very good. All right, Just before we go on a break, I think what you're doing is quite commendable in terms of having to know the intricacies regarding this trade agreement, and I think the viewers also have to have more insight regarding this. But I would like you to hold on your thoughts. We'll be right back with more to discuss more on this.
Thank you.
All right, Global Business Report returns in a moment. Stay with us. Good to have you back on Global Business Report, and we're talking about the Continental African Free Trade Agreement, and I've still got Mr. Mansur Ahmed, President of Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. It's good to have you again, sir. Now, other than being the president of MAN, you're also an executive director of the Dangote Group. Now, Mr. Aliko Dangote, the president of the group and Africa's richest man, has expressed concern over Nigeria becoming a member of the trade bloc. For lack of a better word, why is he skeptical about Nigeria becoming a signatory to this free trade agreement?
Yes, well, I think this is, in fact, if you like, the crux of the matter. Alhaji Aliko Dangote and the Dangote Group probably is today the largest manufacturer of manufacturing products in the continent, or at least in the sub-Saharan Africa.
Indeed.
And he already has investments in about 12 or 13 other countries. So he's fully aware of the intricacies of trading across Africa. He's fully aware of the key infrastructure programs, as well as the trade facilitation bottlenecks that exist. So when he expresses doubt, it's not that he's expressing doubt about the value of trade, because he knows more than anybody else the value of trade. What open, effective trade relations can create for manufacturers, but he's also aware of the bottlenecks. And what he has been saying is that if we are going to engage in trade, we have to address those bottlenecks. And those some of the ones we have discussed earlier. So clearly, the issue is not so much that we want trade. Yes, trade is extremely valuable, but we need to make sure that trade does not happen on its own, that we have to do things that make trade viable and profitable. And I think that's the issue that Alhaji Aliko has been raising most of the time.
All right, very good. Now, to what extent does his stance on the trade agreement influence your own position in your capacity as a president of MAN?
The Dangote Group, of course, is part of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria.
Indeed.
But our position is actually based on an aggregate assessment of the impact on the industry as a whole. Yes, of course, we recognize that many members of our association will benefit tremendously, but we also know that many will. We have over 2,600 members within the association. And there are a lot of others who are not members, but who obviously do benefit from whatever initiatives the association introduces. So our concern is for the industry as a whole, but we do recognize that balancing the needs of the large players and the small players is one of the reasons why we are able to arrive at positions that reflect the overall interest of the economy. We have several sectors. We have about 10 sectors, and even the different sectors don't always have the same needs and the same requirements. For instance, the pharmaceutical sector, the petrochemical sector. There's a lot of interrelationship between the various sectors, and sometimes in order to work out what is best for the industry, you have to try to resolve differences between these different sectors. Even within the same sector, sometimes you have one part of the sector demanding certain initiatives, another sector demanding the opposite. So balancing these needs is constantly the responsibility of the association, and it is because we are able to do so that we can engage government on a sustainable basis. And this has really helped a great deal in policy making, because in the past, government listens to divergent needs and divergent comments from different sectors, and then they have problems where to lean. Now, I think with the help of the association, we can balance these needs and come out with policy prescriptions that will work generally for all, or that will at least be win-win in the long run.
Very good. Now, we do know that you were one of the group executive director in charge of refineries and petrochemicals at the Nigerian Petroleum Corporation, NNPC. What is your view of the NNPC refineries? What needs to be done to get them to work, or should they be scrapped? Some have said we should deregulate the
My personal position a long time has been to fully deregulate the sector, to privatize those assets. If NNPC wants to maintain some activity or some participation, it can participate at a level which does not necessarily involve a total control of the sector. And I believe it is unfortunate this has taken so long to happen, because what we're experiencing today, where a country that has capacity to process 445,000 barrels per day is still importing 90% of its product needs. And that simply means that we are creating huge waste in terms of originally the foreign exchange that we spend to bring these things.
Indeed.
The subsidy issue itself is a major constraint on our economy. And frankly, the earlier this subsidy is removed, the better. We have to, and we know, the president today was indeed the person who actually made the best use of what is called subsidy benefits.
All right.
In the past, when he was the chairman of PTF. He took the petroleum subsidy and actually used it to build infrastructure, to improve hospitals, to improve schools. Why can't we do the same now?
Very good question. And there's been a lot of uproar, regarding the state of the refineries, and there's been so much argument as to whether, why probably there should be an expiry date of these refineries, and we spent so much on turnaround maintenance, and we're getting very little for it, as it were. Now, I would like us to go back to the Continental Free Trade Agreement. When we went on that break, you and I were talking about the issue of having all these regional blocks, whether it's the ECOWAS, the South African bloc, the East African bloc. Now, how do they harmonize, their positions or their customs duties and other intricate peculiarities regarding, the free trade agreement itself? So how do we harmonize all that position?
Well, like I said, first of all, what we need to do is to make the RECs, that's the regional organizations, the, if you like, anchors for the negotiation. And whatever is negotiated at the continental level will now have to be harmonized with what is happening at the regional level. So that, if you like, if we have agreed on tariff arrangements across the continent, those tariff arrangements will actually be incorporated in the regional agreements. And I think this is the process that will take place probably as we go into the detailed negotiations.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Mansur Ahmed, he is an engineer and president of the Manufacturer Association of Nigeria and also executive director of Dangote Group. It's good to have you with us to have this extensive discussion on the African Free Trade Agreement.
Thank you for having me.
That's always a pleasure.
Thank you.